Okay, guys, I just want to talk about something that, has been kind of, I think, criticized, I guess, is about in Star Wars. I think people, and I think this is somewhat of a fair criticism without seeing Clone Wars. The criticism of, no way Anakin would turn to the dark side only because, oh, he couldn't save Padme from death. Oh, no, now he's going to turn to the dark side. People say that that's the reason why, because he couldn't save Padme from certain death, because that's kind of how the movie presented it. Revenge of the Sith, that's kind of how it presented it, and that's why I love Clone Wars so much. It gives so much more clarification, I guess would be the word. So I think if I were to get the Cole's notes of why did Anakin turn to the dark side, and I think the idea of Padme as sort of being the reason why he turned to the dark side is not the reason. It's the 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 straw that broke the camel. The straw that broke the camel's back is he couldn't save Padme from dying. That's the straw that broke the camel's back. But they're clear whether you look at even just Phantom Menace, even in Attack of the Clones, you see again the setup of in the straws. If we want to make the analogy to the straw that broke the camel's back, then we're comparing them to little straws. And so even just going back to Phantom Menace, he had to leave his mother, and I think that's always hard on someone, emotionally, physically, because at that point he didn't have a father. He didn't have a father figure in his life growing up. He was a slave. So I think these are just common sense stuff. You don't have a father. You were ripped away from your mother when you were very young, or not very young, but when you were like 10. You were slaves. You barely lived, because he never got to experience childlike innocence. Never. Because even when, before he became a Padawan, he was a slave. So he never really got to experience type life being a child. He didn't have a father, and by the time, before he was even 10, he had to leave his mother in such a hard choice that I'm sure weighed on him so much. And not only that, he couldn't save his mother from death. Again, because what is the most consistent part of Anakin as a character throughout all mediums, throughout all the films, is that he just wanted the power to do what he wanted. He wanted the power he thought he was potential of. And ultimately to get what he wants done. And to be this ultimatum of power type thing. And so it's again these steps from there in Phantom Menace. Thing number one, he didn't have a father. He never had that father figure, because a father could play with you. A father can understand what it's like to be a boy growing up. A mother really can't. And even then he was a slave of Watto, on Tatooine. Then he had to leave his mother when he was very young. So those are stuff in the Phantom Menace. Let's move over to Attack of the Clones. And now you get to stuff about him just not liking being a Padawan. Because I think as a Jedi there's so much rules. I think that's another big thing, is the rules. And maybe this was not the greatest execution in Attack of the Clones. I'll fully admit that. But you could clearly tell he just was getting, I guess, tired and sick of and bored of him being taught by Obi-Wan. He just in general sense, another straw. He was just at that point just starting to as the years go by, get more and more sick and more tired of just merely being a Padawan. He wanted to be more. Again, sticking with this idea of he wanted to be more. And again, I think this all comes down to the foundations. If he didn't have a good at Tatooine, he clearly didn't have a good education. He clearly was not rich. He didn't really have a father. He wasn't really free for anything. And so he just grew up probably depressed and probably very sad. And so coming here, again, becoming a Jedi, and I think another thing is it just didn't live up to his expectations. Being a Jedi to Anakin never lived up to his expectations. Because you saw in Phantom Menace, he was like, oh, cool, a lightsaber. Oh, cool, a Jedi. I really want to be a Jedi. I really want to be a Padawan. But then when he gets there, I think this idea of his expectations and how fun it would be to be a Jedi is up here. When in reality, it was really down here. Being a Jedi, in terms of how hard work, how much fun it is. and all that stuff. And so I think that's another big quality. Feel like people forget is growing up. Anakin idolized Jedi's, and look what happened. He became a Jedi, and clearly by the looks of Attack of the Clones, he didn't really have much fun with it. Then again, like I said with the other previous straw on the camel's back, um, him falling in love with Padme. And why is that a straw? Falling in love with Padme. Because he's forced between a rock and a hard place. He's forced to A, love Padme, but B, lie to the Jedi. Which again was at that point such a hard thing for him to grasp. Because again, like I said, he still idolized the Jedi. He still wanted to be with the Jedi. So it's kind of like, do I go, in a very personal route, or do I continue to be the Jedi that I want to be? Do I want to let my personal life get ahead of my power that I want to have? Type thing, because it all comes down to the power it all comes down to Anakin wanting the power to do what he wants for the people he loves and for the people he cares about. Because at the end of the day, his heart is always in the right place. But yet he's just corrupted down a dark path. Because, wanting to love Padme is not a bad thing. Wanting to just be a child is not a bad thing. Wanting to love your mother and to have a father is not a bad thing. Wanting to save your mother from death is not a bad thing. Wanting to save your wife and your pregnant children from death is not a bad thing. And so we'll get to more in depth later. So that's kind of an Attack of the Clones, and more on that, losing his arm. Yeah, I mean, he just lost a limb. I mean, is that not, So my point is that it's just one depressed thing after another with Anakin, where he keeps having hope in the Jedi. He keeps having hope in his abilities. He keeps having hope in the light side, in the Jedi Order, and it fails him. So let's get into Clone Wars, where a lot of big stuff happens that I think you have to keep a note about. Let's go over. So, number one, continue the continuous things we were talking about. So everything I said previously continues. Couldn't save his mother. Struggles to love Padme and, honor the Jedi Order. Never had a mother. Or not never had a mother. Was ripped away from her mother. Had to leave his mother. Was a slave and all that stuff still was there. So everything I said previously still complies, except more. More stuff about the war and him tirelessly fighting in a war that he didn't ultimately, that is such a one-sided war, one-note war. That's a big thing. But also, when you just look at these little arcs, you could just see the dark side coming in. You could see him just being more aggressive. And then also, once he became a master to Ahsoka, you could see really start to care for her. And when the biggest straws come in season 5, Ahsoka's arc. Because if we want to talk about, the straws that were added to Anakin in this analogy being a camel, the biggest straws happened in the arc that Ahsoka left the Jedi Order in season 5 of Clone Wars. Because in that arc, Anakin realized a few things. He felt he failed Ahsoka. By the end of the arc, it's very visible. He felt like he failed Ahsoka. That Ahsoka was, Anakin's opportunity to prove himself to the Jedi by having a Padawan. And by Ahsoka leaving, almost felt to him that he was responsible for Ahsoka leaving, that was his guilt. And on top of his guilt, he also felt like he failed Ahsoka. He really thought that. And I think but also number 2, the bigger thing, he felt like the Jedi Order failed Ahsoka. And he also realized the corrupt ways of the Jedi Order, and the brutality of the Jedi Order, of all the accusations without proof, banning her from the Jedi Order, and all that stuff. And he realized the corrupt and almost cynical nature of the Jedi Order. And also probably took a few Cole's notes from Barriss Offee's point. Because she ultimately sensed it as a Jedi. She sensed the corruption. She sensed the 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 kind of evilness and corruptness of the Jedi. And so I think it's like this arc really did a number on Anakin, and having to hunt down Ahsoka. That at that point we'd seen their relationship grow for 5 seasons now. To have to go through the pain of hunting and searching for your Padawan, who's being accused of terrible, terrible things, and for ultimately to see the Jedi just go brutally and brutally and brutally with these accusations. And he realized at the end of the day, he failed Ahsoka. He whether that's true or false is beyond question. Because ultimately, I think that it's not Anakin's fault. To me, I don't think Anakin failed Ahsoka. But to him, because he's all coming down to he wants the power, he wants the ability to save the ones he loves, to help the ones he cares about. Because again, like I said, his intentions are always in the right place. It's just a matter of how do you deal with what you want. Where it's like ultimately at the end of the day, he wants to save this person, he wants to help this person, but it's, so I think it was just, again, in this case, in this particular scenario, why do I say that the most straws were dropped on the camel's back here? Well, because he just realized so much, it exposed the Jedi. It exposed what the Jedi would do in a situation, in scenario like this. Because the accusations in the trial of Ahsoka Tano is just a great case study for Anakin to see what is the Jedi like in times like this? What is the Republic like in a time like this? And he saw the brutality of how much they went to, how much the great lengths they went to punish Ahsoka. And yet she was innocent. And realizing so much different things about this arc, and seeing Barris's side of you, seeing Tarkin's side of you, seeing again like the corrupt side, and realizing maybe I did fail Ahsoka, and he had to live with the guilt through the rest of the show. So now that's where we get into season 7 of Clone Wars. And by the way, in season 6, so you gotta imagine, in season 6 of Clone Wars, he still had to feel with the guilt. But in season 6, in the Orders arc, the arc about 5 and Tubbs in Order 66, he saw Fives, one of his most trusting soldiers. Fives, one of the most trusting soldiers he had, get killed right in front of him, due to stuff that, he was out of his control and stuff. And so, again, that was probably hard on Anakin. But also, coming back to season 7, when he ultimately had to deal with Ahsoka, and had to reunite with Ahsoka. And also, once again, Anakin not being there for Ahsoka. Because at the end of the day, what happened in season 7? He had to go save the Chancellor. So what happened at the end of the day was, once again, he couldn't be there for Ahsoka. At the end of the day, he couldn't be there for Ahsoka. He had to go save the Chancellor. And so I think that had guilt on him. And then that's when we get to Revenge of the Sith. With all the stuff. Which is just what I'm trying to say. It's not just there's not one reason why Anakin turned. There's a multitude of steps and a multitude of instances for why Anakin left and turned to the dark side. But they all branch from this idea of Anakin Skywalker always wanted more from himself. Always had high expectations for him and his abilities. Let me repeat. Anakin Skywalker saw very highly of himself. Always expected very highly of him and his abilities and what he can do as a Jedi, as a person, as a friend. And he just, every time he couldn't get to that level, every time something bad happened to him, every time he couldn't, again, once I said, like I said, couldn't reach his potential. Every time he let someone die, every single time he felt like he made a mistake, it put so much pressure on him. So it just spawning down to the idea of his expectations for himself. Again, as a Jedi, as a friend, as a comrade, as a soldier, as all this stuff. And so it just, I think, is kind of who he was shaped to be by 9-year-old Anakin, by 8-year-old Anakin, by 7-year-old Anakin, not having a father, being a slave, always having to go to work, really taught himself toughness. You know, at such a young age, he had to know how to clean things up. At a very young age, he had to know how to make droids, and he never had a father. He never had anything like that. Never had time to be a kid. He always had to work, and then that spawned from his kind of he idolized the Jedi. So when he became the Jedi, and he realized it wasn't what he thought it would be, and it's not as fun as he thought it would be, and it's not as cool and exciting as he thought it would be. That added value and added anger to him. Then the Clone Wars, fighting in wars and losing his arm and starting to fall in love with Padme and struggling between do I live my personal life and lie to the Jedi or respect the order that I so fondly love in the Jedi Order. Then move into Clone Wars and his relationship with Ahsoka and having to realize that he thought he failed Ahsoka, and he realized that the Jedi Order failed Ahsoka, and he realized the corrupt nature of the Republic and the corrupt nature of the Senate, and the corrupt nature of this world, this galaxy, and starting to once again not being able to save his mother and having bad dreams about Padme. And again, like we said, the idea of him not being able to save Padme was the straw that broke the camel's back, but yet, if you only watch the films, the only straw you saw. So, stay tuned for videos coming right at you.